Good morning and welcome to the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary Education's May Advisory Committee meeting. I had to make sure I got the month right because everything is flying by right now. First, we need to do a roll call to make sure to confirm that we have a quorum. So what I would like to do is when your name is called, just do a quick introduction of yourself also. So, say your name and then, what your appointment is or what your position on the advisory committee is. Either Richie or can you help with that, or is it easier for me to do it? I don't mind either way.
I can do it now.
Okay, cool.
So Lee Farron.
Good morning, Lee Farron. I am a former student representative and the chair of the advisory committee.
Tess Dubois-Carey.
Good morning, everybody. I'm the Vice Chair Industry Representative. Nice to be here today.
And Robert Boykin.
Good morning, everyone. Robert Boykin, public member appointed by the Senate Committee.
And Kansen Chu is absent today. Melanie Delgado.
Good morning, I'm Melanie Delgado. I am a consumer advocate representative.
Joseph Holt.
Good morning. I'm an institutional representative on the board. Bureau.
It looks like Robin Smith hasn't made it yet. Tracy Tambasia.
Good morning, everybody. Tracy Tambasia. I'm a public member appointed by the speaker.
And that's all voting members present. We do have 6, which is a quorum.
Lee, I think you were muted.
Man, and you missed all the good things I said too. Thank you. Okay, so as usual, today's meeting will be run according to the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act and the Brown Act. Under the updated rules, advisory committee members are required to appear on camera during this meeting. So if you're unable to be visible for technology reasons, all of that we understand. Just let us know when you need to turn off the camera so that we understand that you won't be visible for that time period. Since this meeting is being conducted via WebEx, please announce yourself by name before speaking, just for clarity of the official record. All advisory committee members are able to unmute themselves to speak during the meeting. Please put yourself back on mute when not speaking to reduce background noise for all participants. This will help with audio quality. We will ensure that all comments from advisory committee members and speakers are heard before proceeding with the agenda. We do welcome public comments on any item on the agenda, and the committee will ask for public comments on each agenda item prior to any potential action being taken. We will go through that process of doing the Q&A and how to indicate that you wish to make a public comment at that time. And then we will call on individuals who've indicated they want to speak. Your microphone will be unmuted and you will have 3 minutes to make your public comment. After the 3 minutes have lapsed, the individual speaking will be placed back on mute. 1 public comment per agenda item is allowed per attendee. For the second agenda item, public comments not on items not on the agenda, the advisory committee has limited the total comment time to 30 minutes. Public comment on any other agenda item is limited to 20 minutes. There's still a 3-minute individual limit for any participant. And the moderator and the IT folks will help with the public comments. So I appreciate all of the assistance you all will provide. And for all speakers, please stay on topic and keep your comments to the allotted time. If there is a question for the advisory committee or the Bureau, as opposed to a comment, you can submit your comment via email. The advisory committee members and the Bureau staff and others who are presenters will not be able to respond to public comment. So we won't be able to answer questions. So there's an email, bppe@dca.ca.gov, and that's the best place to submit any questions where you need a response. Before we go forward, Debbie, I know you wanted to introduce a few new members of your team, so do you want to take it over?
Thank you so much, Lee. So yes, by way of introduction, I am Debbie Cochran. I'm the Bureau Chief here. And since our last meeting in February, we have had some very exciting developments on our staff that I'm very excited to share with the committee. First, I wanted to announce and share the promotion of a member and a face that you have come to know and trust over the last couple of years, Elizabeth Elias. You've known her as our enforcement chief over our compliance, discipline, and annual reports unit, and she is now our deputy bureau chief over all of our enforcement divisions. So I'm incredibly excited for her to take on that new challenge, and we'll let her say a few words.
Excuse me. Good morning, members of the committee. I'm thrilled to be given this opportunity to continue to work under Debbie's wonderful leadership and to be able to support her and the Bureau's enforcement section while fostering collaboration internally and externally and driving the Bureau's objectives forward so that we can ensure, the highest standards of education and consumer protection are met. So I am really grateful for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, and congratulations. And another exciting announcement, a new face to join these meetings and the Bureau's senior staff. Manila Vongmani is our newly announced as of today. Today is her very first day with the Bureau as a Deputy Bureau Chief over administration and licensing units. And she is joining us from outside of DCA and the Bureau. She's joining us from the Department of Healthcare Services. So I will let Manila say a little bit. Not too much because it's day one and we don't want to scare her away.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Manila Vongmani, and I'm the Chief of Licensing Admin here. It's my first day, and I'm very excited to be here and hope to continue to make a positive impact in education. Prior to this, I came from healthcare services, developing contracts and policies and supporting managed care plans through the procurement and readiness efforts to ensure that they can provide quality medical services before receiving a contract with the state. But prior to that, I worked at CalSTRS, which is the retirement pension systems for California's public school educators. And I oversaw the training program where we trained approximately 1,800 county of educations and school districts across California on their reporting requirements related to the teachers' retirement laws and the education codes. So very happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Lee, for letting me make those brief announcements.
Of course. Welcome and congratulations to both of you. We're excited to have you. We'll try to be extra kind to Manila today. Okay, so we're moving on the agenda. The second item is public comment on items not on the agenda. So again, just a reminder, we cannot discuss or take action on any matter raised during this public comment, but we can decide whether or not to place it on the agenda of a future meeting. So let's see. Again, I know I just said this, but I'll just reiterate it. If you have a question as opposed to a comment, please feel free to email bppe@dca.ca.gov. Moderator folks, can you help me with the public comment for agenda item number 2?
Absolutely. Might I recommend that we check in with the room first to see if we have anybody in person in the Sacramento?
Sounds good. Is there anyone in person who would like to make a comment on agenda item number 2, items not on the agenda?
All right. The room may be having some audio issues. I just got a message by text saying that no one's in the room. Let's do online, and we'll see if they can get their audio working so they can vocalize it for the recording. In the meantime, we are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. For our dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, you have 3 different screens and only one of them has a hand button. So you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's your ... at the bottom of the screen, and cycle through one of 3 pages in order to find that hand. I have instructions on the screen. If you'd like to make a comment, raise that hand. You'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. We have a new feature which is still being tested, so you may be able to see a timer in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Hopefully you do, and that's everything. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so no public comment for agenda item number 2.
We have no requests for public comment.
Great. I just wanted to confirm it. Okay, wonderful. So agenda item number 3 is review and approval of the February 7th advisory committee meeting minutes. Advisory committee members, everyone have a chance to review any questions, amendments, comments? Okay, hearing none. I'm not gonna lie, I always forget which order I'm supposed to do this in. Do I do public comment now? Or do we vote first? I don't know why I have the hardest time with this.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, thanks, Tess.
I'll second the motion. This is
Oh, well,
Melanie.
you need to take public comment first. Sorry.
Oh,
Okay, thank
so
you. That's what
sorry.
I was waiting for. Sorry about that. Hold your firsts and seconds. Okay, public comment on item 3 of the agenda, review and approval of the February 7th, 2024 advisory committee meeting minutes. Anyone in the room who would like to make a comment?
There's no public members in the room.
Okay, thank you. Anyone online who would like to make a public comment?
This is the moderator. We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise that hand by tapping the hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... at the bottom in order to find your hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment on the meeting minutes. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Yes, please. All right. Shall we try that one more time? Test, or I probably shouldn't specifically call anyone out. Anyone willing to move to approve the meeting minutes for February?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Thank you, Tess.
And I will second. This is Melanie.
Thank you, Melanie. Okay, all in favor? I think I'm supposed to go through and ask people. Sorry, man, it's rusty. Okay. I'll do a roll call, and if you're in favor, just say aye. If you're opposed, say nay. Tess.
Aye.
Tracy.
Aye.
Melanie.
Aye.
Joseph.
Aye.
Robert.
Aye.
And myself, aye. Okay. I think that's everyone on the committee. So, okay, motion is passed. The minutes are approved. We will move on to agenda item 4, which is remarks by a representative of the Department of Consumer Affairs.
And we're joined by Karina Moreno from DCA for this.
Good morning. My name is Karina Moreno of the California Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. I'd like to welcome new members Angelique Ashby and Robin Smith, and I'd like to thank the remainder of the committee for your continued service and dedication to protect the consumers. May 5th through 11th was Public Service Recognition Week, and DCA joins in honoring the more than 3,000 DCA Board and Bureau employees dedicated to protecting California consumers. DCA thanks all employees and Board and Bureau members for their service and contributions to the consumer protection. Next is the meet and greet with Secretary Moss. On April 30th, DCA hosted an in-person meeting with Secretary Tamika Moss and executive leaders. It served as an opportunity for DCA leaders to meet our new secretary and hear her vision and priorities for the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency and the department. Next is the federal Title IV financial aid funding. The U.S. Department of Education announced a new regulation that will affect non-degree school programs approved by boards and bureaus starting July 1st, 2024. The regulation will limit program length to 100% of the state's minimum hour requirements, making the minimum requirement the maximum. Non-compliant programs will no longer be eligible for federal Title IV funding after July 1st, 2024. However, on April 15th, 2024, in response to questions from numerous states and schools, the U.S. Department of Education issued guidance regarding changes to program length restrictions, including exercising its enforcement discretion until January 1st, 2025. DCA will continue to work with the U.S. Department of Education, California legislator, and executive officers on this important issue. Next is the licensee scam alert. DCA has learned of a recent increase in scams targeting licensees. Though the nature of the scams vary, they are similar in that they are involved individuals falsely identifying themselves as Border Bureau employees and telling the licensee they are under investigation. The scammers attempt to gather personal and/or financial information and may even demand payment. Board and bureaus are urged to be vigilant and proactive in providing licensees with tips on avoiding scams. Next is a DEI update. On April 5th, 2024, DCA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, also referred to as DEI, Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting. The committee reviewed and discussed the member application process, establishing subcommittees and solicited input from the committee on how to expand language access, workforce development, and advance DEI in 2024. The next committee meeting will be held on July 26, 2024. If you have ideas you'd like the committee to consider, please let your executive officer or bureau chief know. As a reminder, DCA's learning management system has many DEI-related training courses available. Board and bureau members are encouraged to participate in available trainings and continue to grow in our DEI efforts. Next is outreach. Last month, DCA's Office of Public Affairs staff participated in 2 Facebook Live events hosted by the Consulate of Mexico's Sacramento and Fresno office during its Financial Education Week. Staff presented Get to Know DCA in Spanish and shared a broad overview of consumer and licensing information. In addition, DCA joined an in-person resource event with the Consulate of Mexico in Sacramento. Another Get to Know DCA virtual event will be held with the Consulate of Mexico in San Bernardino on May 14th. The consulates have expressed interest in future event partnerships to share even more licensing and consumer resources. Additionally, in the coming months, DCA will be developing workforce development outreach opportunities for all board and bureaus to participate in. I look forward to sharing more information soon. Next is the board member orientation training, BMOT, June 18th, 2024. It's a reminder that board members must complete BMOT within 1 year of their appointment or reappointment. BMOT will be offered virtually on June 18th, 2024, and again on October 22nd, 2024. Members can register for this training via LMS. Next is Form 700. The annual Form 700 filing period has ended. DCA and BBR would like to thank all of our board members and executive officers for helping us achieve nearly 100% compliance. Again, thank you for this opportunity to join you today. I'm happy to answer any questions from the advisory committee at this time. If further information or assistance is needed with any of the items shared today, please don't hesitate to reach out to Board and Bureau Relations.
Thank you, Karina.
You're
Any
welcome.
questions or comments from the advisory committee? Okay, then we will open agenda item 4 for public comment. First, anyone in the room wishing to make a public comment on agenda item 4, the remarks from Karina Moreno from the DCA.
There are no
Thank you. Any public comment? The slide is up, so it explains to you how to do it. Any public comments from the virtual attendees?
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you so much. We will move on to agenda item 5. For this agenda item, we have subparts, so we will take public comment after each subpart because they often are different, quite different reports. So it's helpful, I think, to pause after each subpart. So we will start with 5A, which is the IT system project.
And we are joined for this discussion for this brief update by Jason Piccioni with the Office of Information Services. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Chief Cochran. Thank you, Chair Farron and members. My name is Jason Piccioni, and I'm the Chief Information Officer, as Chief Cochran said. I joined you in February to share the refined plan and progress of the IT project aimed very specifically at replacing, converting, and retiring the Bureau's current data system called SAIL. As well as continue to enhance the online options for several functions on the Connect system. I said that we would be heads down between February and the fall in that project, and I'd come back and share potentially short updates. So I'm here to do that. We are making progress. I could talk about the IT side of it and the tech items, but I think one of the most valuable things that I have seen come out of our work so far is the collaboration and the cross-team discussions and work that has been done with Bureau staff. And I attribute that to the commitment and the prioritization from Chief Cochran and the leadership and staff at the Bureau to do the business work to support the IT project. And I think that has paid dividends and opened up a lot of really valuable, good discussions, and will really show its worth in the end product. So not a ton to report specifically. We are continuing in the areas of data conversion planning, data conversion refinement and testing, as well as business functional refinement, design, and testing, and still targeting the fall of 2024 for the SAIL data conversion and retirement, and 2 primary online functions at that point. Happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions or comments from the committee members? Hearing none, we'll move to public comment for item 5A, the IT system project update. First, checking with anybody in the room.
There are no current public members present.
Thank you. Now moving to our virtual attendees, the slide is up to explain how to make public comment. Please feel free to follow the instructions and make your comment or a request to make your comment now.
We are open for public comment via WebEx for item 5A. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Yes, please. Thank you. Moving on to item 5B, which is the licensing report.
Good morning, committee members. Over the course of the last several months, licensing has been taking a close look at our processes and procedures, as well as specifically the systems that we use to track our data. Licensing has been focused on ensuring that we're reviewing in the most efficient manner possible, while also ensuring that we're meeting all of your. Yep.
Greg, I'm sorry. Can you just introduce yourself quickly so people have your name
Sure.
and title? Okay,
My name
thank
is
you.
Greg Dockerbrook. I'm the Bureau's licensing chief. Sorry about that. We've incorporated some of the new data reporting measures into our licensing report for this quarter, and we will continue working on drilling down our data into quality and useful data for the committee. Additionally, licensing would always welcome any suggestions or ideas for future data reporting as we continue to examine our data. Can you go to the next slide, please? Our first new slide, we've extracted a summary of our pending applications that currently reside within the Bureau. These numbers have been divided by current quarter, fiscal year to date, as well as giving us a total number of pending as of the end of Q3, which ended at the end of March. For each of those time periods, we've broken down the amount of each application that we received, approved, and completed. It's important to note that while we do receive the most number of verification of exemptions, it's important that committee understand that their full approval and full renewals are the most complex and require the most time of our staff. Currently, at the end of Q3, we have 105 pending full approvals and 99 full renewals. Next slide, please. As we continue to look at our data, this is another new slide that extracts our application processing timeframes for the current quarter, fiscal year to date, as well as a continuous 12-month rolling average. For clarity, just like the previous slide, the columns are labeled average days to complete or include all adjudication outcomes. So that would include denials and withdrawals. Also for the current quarter, it does show both our low and high number of days for processing approvals that were completed during the quarter. I am encouraged by the average days to approve our full approval applications, which was 465 for the applications completed in Q3. This is significantly lower than our 12-month rolling average. So as we continue to monitor, we're hoping it continues to go in that direction. I would also like to point out the approval timelines for our full renewal applications. While the numbers show a high number of days for approval, what it doesn't show on this data is that we do have a pocket of applications that skewed our numbers up for this particular quarter. However, for the renewal applications that were approved in this quarter that were received in the last 48 months, the time to approve is only 253 days. So that's encouraging. Also, as a bit of extra transparency for the committee, we did complete a chess clock analysis for the two applications with the longest approval time frame for both initial and renewal. Just as a reference, the chess clock analysis measures the time the application spent in each phase of the review process, breaking down how much time it was with the Bureau reviewing versus with the institution waiting on accurate and complete responses to allow us to move forward. I'm going to start by talking about the full approval that took 904 days. And we actually did a chess clock analysis for this one. Of the 904 days, it was with the Bureau for 794 of those days, 580 days of which the application was waiting for assignment with a QAU Ed specialist. At the time that it was sent to QAU, there was a backlog for new approvals that we've talked about previously. However, presently with QAU, there are only 8 applications total pending assignment. So with our current assignment queue, we should see a drastic reduction in approval timeframes. And then I'm going to talk about for the full renewal that took 1,452 days. That one was an interesting situation. When we went through the chess clock analysis, we actually found that almost 900 of the 1,452 days was actually us waiting on the institution to provide responses. So while we send out a deficiency letter and say we need a response in X number of days, oftentimes for this particular application, we would see, oh, we need 90, 120 days per response. And so over time, that just adds up on itself. Can you go to the next slide, please? This one's a slide you've all seen before. Our oldest full app in the queue, updated as of this week, is December of 2023. Our oldest full app currently under review is from July of 21, and it's pending a denial currently. Our oldest renewal full application is from July of 2020. We're still waiting on some updated financial information from the institution. And then the median date of our full apps in our RQ updated as of this week is February of 2024. I am also happy to report that this will be the last time that we report out statistics on applications in the queue. By the end of next month, all of our applications for licensing will be assigned out to our staff. And moving from then on, we will just be assigning them out as they're deemed complete as they hit the Bureau. Next slide, please. Slide 5 is our statewide population by location type. We've got a total of 1,825 locations. 969 of those are mains, 351 branches, and 505 satellites. Of those locations, 423 are approved by means of accreditation. We've got 519 full non-accredited approvals. We currently have 1 conditional approval, 27 provisional approvals, and 108 out-of-state registrations. Next slide, please. And then to wrap up the licensing report, our licensing workshops for Q3 in January, we had 12 registrants and 12 participated. February, we had 10 registrants and we actually had 11 participants. And then in March, we actually saw a pretty big increase up to 44 registrants and 44 participants. We're predicting that it probably had to do with people being either out of town or unavailable due to holidays or new into the semester. We're encouraged by the jump in March, and we hope that more people take advantage of the virtual workshops that we have available. I thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions or comments.
Thank you, Greg. Super helpful. I think it's great, first of all, that you get to eliminate the queue report. That's got to be something that y'all are excited about too. And I just, yeah. So congrats. Obviously, that's a lot of work to get that going. And I also just wanted to mention that chess clock analysis, I think, is so helpful to understand, like, how those numbers could be skewed by, that back and forth with institutions. Advisory committee members, any questions or comments?
Yes, I wanted to add a gratitude and a praise for including that chess clock information. I have a couple follow-up questions and thoughts on that, Greg. The first is, I assume, given the anecdotal nature that is that you took a couple of case studies that, and I recall from prior discussions that this is a labor-intensive process, that to do a chess clock analysis is hyper manual and can only be done sort of piecemeal. It's not something you can do systemically. Is that correct?
That is correct. Currently, we are hopeful, in conjunction with the IT system upgrade, that potentially it would make it a more streamlined analysis once that system is rolled out. But currently, it is very labor intensive, and we'd have to see what functionality is available once the new system comes in.
And in a sense that you, as a stakeholder, shape how the system works, has that been listed as a design principle? That is a status stamp that says whose court it's in, whether it's in the Bureau's court or the institution's court?
To my knowledge, that's not one of the current functions. However, with the abilities of us being able to check when we've sent out previous deficiency letters from inside the system and also monitor comments and notes that are kept by bureau staff in a much easier way than the current system, it should provide a little bit more ease to the process. However, until it's actually fully functional, I won't be able to provide a full assessment.
So probably still manual, but an easier path for that manual accounting.
Potentially, yeah.
If I could suggest that you maybe establish a threshold by which you do a chess clock analysis. So, for example, when you cross 300 days or pick a number that maybe is the longest quartile or some period of time, and then just initiate that as a standard workflow. Rather than looking far in arrears and kind of picking a couple cases. I appreciate that you picked 2 cases that showed balance, that you had a QOE, was the problem in case A and case B was an institution problem, and that's probably true. We only have the 2 examples to go from, so it'd be great if we had 6 or 8 data points to see what if there's a sort of a trend or a norm.
Sure.
I know it is though, light is always good, so more information is better, and appreciate the manual work that you did for that, and look to make that more systemic going forward as a goal.
Thank you for the feedback.
Any other questions or comments from committee members? Okay, hearing none, we'll move to public comment for item 5B, which is the licensing report. Anyone in person in the room who would like to make a public comment?
There's no public member present in the room.
Thank you. Anyone, any virtual attendees? The instructions to make a public comment are on the screen.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If on 5B as in Bravo, if you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As previously mentioned, you'll be given 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 30-second warning before your time expires. Our first request comes from Mr. Wright. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Alrighty. So Gregory, we've met before. I came down to your office with Mr. Roger from my school. I want to commend you because all the questions I had ready to ask you, you killed them. You with the new slides and everything, you answered all my questions, and I want to say thank you for giving me the transparency I was asking for. And I want to say that everything I have in front of me that I was about to ask questions, you just answered it. And moving forward, I wish you the best because I hope this new program you guys are setting up to track this information more readily will help bring down those wait times and everything, because you just knocked it out of the park in my eyes, because all the questions I had written down in front of me, they're now useless because you answered them. So I will give credit where credit is due, Greg. I know you couldn't answer them when I was in person, but this meeting, you've answered all of them, and I want to commend you for that. So that's my comment. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any further public comments?
That appears that was our only request for public comment.
Okay. Then we will close that and continue on. Before we move to the next agenda item, I just want to acknowledge we had another committee member join for her first meeting. Robin, if you would like to unmute and just briefly introduce yourself, name and your appointed, your position on the committee would be great. Welcome.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Smith. I am of counsel with the National Consumer Law Center. I'm a little sick, so hopefully you can, my voice is not very good today, but I apologize for being late. I had it on my calendar for tomorrow, so I'm obviously technically challenged when it comes to calendars, but I'm happy to be here and looking forward to serving on the committee. Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here, and I hope you feel better soon. You sound fine. I know it doesn't feel that way, but you sound fine. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5C, the quality of education report.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ebony Santee. I'm the Education Administrator over the Quality of Education Unit. Hello to the committee and to the public. Here is our report for Quality of Ed. Next slide, please. So minor change to some of our 94885.1 schools. We did have another school become accredited, so that total is up to 47 currently. 49 of those schools, as you know, have expired or closed. 19 of those are exempt. There is one extension pending, and there are 22 surrendered degrees and 4 suspended degree programs. Next slide, please. For our 94885.5 schools, we had 2 more institutions become accredited, and we had 1 more school suspend their degrees, and we still have 13 expired or closed schools. 2 of those are exempt, and 28 of those currently are pursuing accreditation. Next slide, please. This is just a summary of the information that I just gave you. So far with our degree granting institutions, 69 of those have obtained accreditation in total. 21 have become exempt. 40 of those have surrendered their programs. 14 have suspended their degree programs, and 62 of those have closed in total. Next slide. And this is just a breakdown of the accreditors that institutions have moved forward with when their accreditation. I will also add that I've been working closely with Greg and Debbie to really refine our information that we share and the timeline information, making sure that we can get you guys accurate information when it comes to the items in our queue as well as licensing, because we do work together. So we want to make sure that when we do present that information, it's clear what's squarely with QU and licensing. So I look forward to the future of being able to give you more information, taking the notes that you've shared with me before to make sure that we present the documentation and numbers that you have requested. So that's all for the quality of ed. Any questions?
Thanks, Ebony. Questions or comments from the committee? Okay, hearing none, we will move to public comment. First, for anybody in the room.
There are no public member present.
Thank you. Now we'll move to public comment from virtual attendees.
We are open for public comment on 5C via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... at the bottom, in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. We will move on to agenda item 5D, which is the annual report update.
Wonderful. And for our next few updates, we actually have Elizabeth Elias back.
Good morning again. For the annual report, I'd like to announce that the annual report unit is currently fully staffed. The annual report staff are currently reviewing submissions of the 2022 annual report that was submitted or due December 1st of last year. For institutions who have not yet submitted the 2022 annual report, the Bureau has initiated enforcement actions against those institutions. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. We are heading into having the next in report due, which would be the 2023 report. That will be due December 1st of 2024. Institutions will be able to begin working on their reports in the portal sometime in August. Notifications will be sent to institutions with more information closer to July of this year. Additionally, a copy of that notification will be available on the Bureau's website as well for institutions too. Next slide. This slide we've presented in the past as a representative of institutions who have initiated the process to submit their annual report. I do want to highlight that these numbers do not reflect institutions have actually submitted the report. This just demonstrates the number of institutions who have opened a workflow in the portal to start working on submitting the report. One of the areas to really highlight is the number of institutions who submitted a report late in 2022. The number of institutions that were submitted the report late decreased significantly. Next slide. The annual report unit conducted 3 workshops for school performance fact sheets in this past quarter. The workshops are to aid institutions in understanding the Bureau's laws and regulations as it relates to school performance fact sheet requirements. Institutions can register online by visiting the link on the slide or visiting our website. And lastly, I just want to say that the annual report unit is one of the smallest teams in the Bureau, yet they manage a significant and important workload. And together, through reviewing our business processes for efficiency, we have made progress in addressing institutions' noncompliance. And I just want to applaud them for their efforts. It's noted. And that concludes the annual report update. If there are any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Committee members, any comments or questions? I had just one question. I know you said that there were a number of institutions that did not submit an annual report and that enforcement action has begun. I saw that, so there's 40 that didn't initiate one. So I'm assuming there's at least 40, but maybe a few more who initiated but didn't complete a report. Does that sound right?
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, make sure I had that right.
Yes, the slide, the ones that didn't submit anything, that means they didn't even attempt to go into the portal to start the process. There are institutions who have gone in and maybe entered a workflow for institution data, but didn't enter anything for their programs or branches or satellites, and have not actually submitted the report to the Bureau. So that is an indicator that the institution knows that they have to submit the report, they just never finalized it.
That makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, hearing no questions or comments from committee members, I'll give you like one more second. No? Okay, we'll move to public comment for item 5D, which is the annual report item. First in the room, any public comment?
There are no public member present.
Thank you. And now moving to virtual attendees.
We are open for public comment via WebEx for 5D as in Delta. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. And we'll move on to item 5E, the compliance and discipline report. And I think we're coming back to you, Elizabeth.
Yes. The compliance unit has had some recent vacancies due to internal promotions to other units at the Bureau. I think those will be announced in later reports. And we are full steam ahead to try to fill those positions as quickly as possible. Thank you, Richie. In Q3, the Bureau conducted 100 inspections. We are currently on track to meet or exceed the number of inspections conducted even in the last 4 fiscal years. We conducted 74 announced inspections and 26 unannounced inspections. At the last meeting, I did anticipate an increase in the number of inspections, which is attributed to new staff who we had recently hired, being able to conduct their own inspections after completing their initial onboarding and training. Additionally, we have been working together to review our business processes for continuous improvement and efficiencies. Next slide. This is a visual of the announced versus unannounced inspections conducted this fiscal year. Next slide. Thank you. This slide identifies inspection results, which does indicate an uptick in the number of notices to comply and enforcement referrals for potential material violations identified during an inspection. The increase in the number of NTCs is linked to our efforts to reassess and realign our business processes with statutory and regulatory requirements. Next slide. The compliance unit conducted 3 workshops in Q3. These workshops are to aid institutions in understanding the Bureau's laws as it relates to our inspection and compliance process. The next workshop is actually scheduled for tomorrow. Institutions can still register online for tomorrow's workshop, and the link is available on the slide. Next slide. Moving on to our discipline unit. The discipline unit is currently fully staffed. As of the end of Q3, we have forwarded 12 accusations, which are charging documents against an institution with an approval to operate, and 9 statement of issues, which is a charging document resulting from a denial of an initial or renewal application. Of the cases sent to the Attorney General's office, 6 accusations and 5 statement of issues have been filed. This means the Bureau's pending actions are now accessible to the public, allowing them to review the causes for discipline or the causes for denial. Next slide. Of the accusations that are pending at the Attorney General's office in Q3, we adjudicated 1 of those cases, which resulted in a default revocation of an institution's approval to operate. Next slide. Among the statement of issues, we resolved 2 of those cases. 1 institution was granted the renewal of their approval to operate. However, that renewal was on a probationary status, an extended probationary status, and the other institution opted for an exemption instead of pursuing their approval to operate, and the Bureau withdrew its action. Next slide. In Q3, we issued 1 emergency decision and 1 automatic suspension. And in Q3, we issued 75 citations. At this point, we have surpassed the number of citations that we issued compared to the last fiscal year. And I anticipate that we will continue to sustain this pace as we address enforcement referrals received from all units within the Bureau. And this slide is just a reminder to everyone that the Bureau does list our enforcement actions by month, and they can be found on our website at the link in this slide. Lastly, I do want to express that both the compliance and discipline teams have actively contributed to improving our processes, and their commitment to adapting even to our new approaches have made a significant impact on our operations. I do thank them for their hard work and their spirit of continuous improvement. Are there any questions from the committee?
Committee members, questions or comments? I think it's great to get folks on board and being, I know we've talked about before that the inspections are time consuming and, and so it's great that y'all have the staff built up to be able to do their own and to be able to, get out there more. So I think that's great. I'm hearing no other comments. We will move to public comment for agenda item 5E, compliance and discipline. First, checking with the room to make sure there's no in-person comments.
There are no public members present.
Thank you. Now moving to our virtual attendees.
We are open for public comment via WebEx on 5E as an echo. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. We will move on to agenda item 5F, which is the complaint investigation report.
And we will welcome Daniel Rangel to the meeting.
Thank you, Debbie. Good morning, Chair Farron and members of the committee. I would like to start with an update on the complaint investigations unit. At the last advisory committee meeting, I reported that we had 1 manager vacancy and 3 special investigator vacancies. I am pleased to announce that we have filled all 4 of those vacancies. Since the manager position was an internal promotion, we were also able to backfill that position. So congratulations to our newest manager, Alita Prudhomme, and our 4 new special investigators, Cecilia Sharp, Brittany Elliott, who were internal promotions within our unit, Miguel Garcia, who is promoting from our compliance unit, as Liz alluded to, and also Elicio Heredia, who is coming to us from another DCA board. I would also like to note that we had gone about 2 years down 1 manager in our unit. So I'm excited about the significant boost filling this long-time vacancy will provide. I would also like to send a special appreciation to the 2 managers who have weathered this 2-year storm with me, Darwin Agar and Richard Acosta. These 2 really stepped up in the absence of a 3rd manager. So thank you to them. Next slide, please. So this is our complaints received slide. In Q1 and Q2 of this fiscal year, we received 217 and 199 complaints respectively. In the Q3, we received a slightly higher number at 237 complaints received. Overall, the incoming complaints remain relatively consistent with previous quarters. The increase in complaints that we saw in 2022 appears to have abated. Next slide, please. Complaints received by school status. So the breakdown of incoming complaints has shifted a bit compared to last fiscal year. Through the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, 19% of our complaints have been non-jurisdiction compared to 24% of our complaints in fiscal year 22-23. Conversely, the percentage of unapproved complaints have increased from 7% of our complaints in 2022-23 to 16% so far in this fiscal year. Slide, please. In fiscal year 22-23, we completed 757 total investigations. Through the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, we have completed 760 investigations. This puts us on pace to complete over 1,000 investigations by the end of the fiscal year, which is about a 34% increase over last fiscal year. Next slide, please. Um, as reported at previous advisory committee meetings, at the end of fiscal year 22-23, we were meeting DCA's performance measure of completing investigations within an average of 180 days, which includes cases closed at intake. We are continuously evaluating our pending cases to ensure we find balance between quickly addressing our highest priority cases while also making significant effort to address our aging cases. Next slide, please. This is a breakdown of our case closure disposition. For the most part, the percentages for each category are consistent with fiscal year 22-23, except for the non-jurisdiction closures. In previous slides, I mentioned the decrease in non-jurisdiction complaints received. Here we are also seeing a decrease in complaints closed as non-jurisdiction from 32% of our cases in fiscal year 22-23 to about 24% so far this fiscal year. We attribute this to our efforts, to the efforts of our intake team and other Bureau staff assisting and, when applicable, redirecting complainants to correct oversight agencies when fielding emails and phone calls. Next slide, please. These are the top allegations referred to discipline, to the discipline unit from investigations. Unapproved institutions continue to be our top allegation. This reflects our efforts to address the increase in unapproved complaints, which I spoke about earlier. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 22-23, duplicate entry was our highest category for cases closed at intake at 72 for the fiscal year. Through the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, that number remains low at 27. As I mentioned at the last advisory committee meeting, this is another example of improvements by our intake team, as suggested by committee members in the past, to provide better instruction to complainants on how to send additional documents to the Bureau after filing a complaint online rather than filing an additional complaint resulting in a duplicate. Next slide, please. The pending caseload. So I fully understand and share the urgency to address our aging cases. We continue our efforts to tackle the aging caseload through increasingly efficient and thorough investigations. This is demonstrated by the fact that through the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year, we have matched the number of completed investigations in all of fiscal year 22-23. This is a testament to our team's commitment to continuous growth and development. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we have also worked hard to fill vacancies, one of which is a manager position that had been vacant for about 2 years. Additionally, since January, we have filled 2 analyst positions and 4 special investigator positions. I'm confident that this will put us in position to build upon the improvements and make significant progress in addressing these cases. Slide, please. Pending caseload count. After peaking at about 850 cases in April of 2023, we have been able to bring the pending caseload down to about 700. We essentially broke even this quarter and were able to maintain at 700. However, after dedicating a substantial amount of time advertising, interviewing, and recruiting staff this quarter, we anticipate a return on that investment in the months ahead. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of the positive impact on students so far this fiscal year. And that concludes my presentation, and I welcome any questions from the committee.
Committee members, any questions or comments for Daniel?
This is my first time, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to raise my hand, but I just wanted to thank you for your presentation and give some positive feedback to the folks that work on these complaints and investigate them. I've seen several cases that have been handled by the Bureau, and they've done a terrific job in sort of resolving the issues with our clients. And I'm encouraged to see that you all are working on addressing and reducing the backlog of complaints that have been pending for a long time. So I just want to thank you for the report, and I'm encouraged by the information you provided.
I have a couple questions and thoughts, Daniel. First, related to those aged cases, if you will, the number in that 1 to 2 years, that's still sort of alarmingly high. Have you considered doing something similar to the licensing division in regards to identifying for very long tail complaints if you're waiting for a response from the student, or like some sort of high level bucketing, if you will, of what's taking so long? Are there internal delays at the bureau? Or are you waiting on the student? Are you waiting on a response from the institution? Which I would hope that wouldn't be on the menu, right? Like if they have you need information from the institution, they should be held accountable for that. But I'm just curious to get more color commentary around those really old cases.
Yeah, so I know that because we have a significant number of cases, not all of the cases are assigned right away to staff for investigation. So keeping the caseload at a manageable level where staff are able to effectively or be effective in their investigations is important. So we are, and that's been shown through the improved efficiencies. That was something that I know that I evaluated when I got here, and also based on my experience with investigations, that there is a threshold where too many assigned cases can become problematic for staff. It can become overwhelming, feel a bit daunting, and we lose some efficiency. So we're focusing on the efficiency of our investigations to move through these complaints. But I know that 700 complaints with about 15 staff that investigate them, it would be a significant number to have all of those assigned right away. So we're focusing on efficiency and in the caseload that they are managing, and keeping it at a manageable caseload so that they can move forward with those cases in an effective manner.
So am I going to take from your response then that those very long cases, the greater than a year cases, may have spent a substantial amount of time unassigned, but that is that the Bureau hasn't been working on them?
There are some, and there are others that the investigations do take longer based on the amount of information that we have to review, the back and forth for some of them. I know that is something that we also do monitor, and when we do have our Connect system rolled out, we will have the ability to kind of monitor that back and forth a lot better. We do have the activities that we track throughout the course of the investigation, and we'll be able to run reports related to that. And I know that that's part of the new system that we're implementing.
Okay, so I would broadly encourage that you pursue that with vigor. That is, being able to identify a chest clock analysis or an equivalent for particularly long tail complaints, ones that are taking a long time. I have another question, but it's on a different topic, and so I'd probably defer, Robin, to you. Sounds like maybe you have a question on this line of question. Oh, you're muted, Robin.
Yeah, sorry. The question I have, and you may not have the answer for this at this meeting, but I'd be interested in knowing whether, because it sounds like it takes time to assign cases, do you have a method for identifying cases that should get higher attention? Do you have a way of prioritizing cases that that seem more important, or that where there's more student harm possibly occurring, that you get to faster than others that are in the queue?
Yes, as I mentioned, when addressing the caseload, it's a balance between addressing those urgent cases with also addressing the backlog of the cases that we have. So we do have a case prioritization process and identify those that need immediate attention and work those into our caseload.
And so in the future, I'd just be interested in seeing how you prioritize. It's beyond the scope today, but I'd be interested in seeing that. Thanks.
I have a separate question, Daniel. It's nearly half of the complaints received by your division are from unapproved schools, so either non-jurisdictional or truly unapproved, or there's also about 13% are contracted schools. Could you, I imagine those are different, the non-jurisdictional, contracted, and unapproved are obviously they're different intrinsically, but could you characterize broadly how much work is done in your division for those? Are they typically faster to resolve or faster to close than complaints of approved schools, or are they roughly the same? I'm looking just for in terms of distribution of labor across the two categories, approved schools and all else.
Generally, the non-jurisdiction would be closed during our intake. And there are some instances where after it being assigned in further investigation, it's determined that it's non-jurisdictional, and we do close it out after the intake process. But the contracted schools, those are they're addressed differently than our investigations. And it's hard to say whether one takes longer than the other. It just really depends on the responses of the schools in those matters. I know that I would say that the approved schools do take a bit longer to investigate because there's a lot more information that we're going through. Oftentimes, we find that a student complaint, though it may came from one student, there may be systemic issues that we need to investigate that go beyond what the student complained about that we found during the course of our investigation. So trying to get enough information to determine whether or not this is a systemic issue sometimes can be a daunting task and effort. There's a lot of back and forth, continued interviews, document review that take place. So there is a lot of effort put forth in it. I know that even myself have personally been involved in many of these investigations and helping to direct and making sure that we do it effectively and efficiently.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments from committee members? Okay, I had just two quick ones. One, I appreciate the detail that you've provided for the reasons why the complaints are closed. I know that's something that committee members have asked for in the past, and I just think it's really helpful to see, not just exempt, but the exempt reason. I think it's helpful for us to see those sorts of that sort of detail. So I appreciate that. And then I was just curious, sort of along the lines of what Mr. Holt's question about the unapproved complaints and like with the increase without providing like detail, I'm wondering if you do start to see patterns, like if there is, like there's a particular institution or a particular, entity that you're getting like that increase of a bulk of complaints from, and if that's something that, is kind of identified or communicated to other parts of the Bureau for some coordinated, response.
Yes, we do our best to try to identify trends with various schools. We do coordinate with the other units when they are, if we have an open complaint against an institution, we coordinate with our compliance unit if they have a scheduled inspection. Generally, they'll check to our system to see if we have an open complaint and reach out to us. And the same thing for licensing when they're going through a renewal, or the quality of education unit. When they're going through a renewal process, we generally will coordinate to collaborate our efforts and making sure that we're approaching it as one bureau rather than various units. So yes, we do take a look at the trends and the number of complaints that we receive for the institutions, and those things do play a factor into prioritization as well.
Makes sense. Thank you. Okay, hearing no more comments from the committee members, we can move to public comment for item 5F. First, we'll start with any public members in the room.
There are no public members present.
Thank you. Now we'll move to virtual attendees. And I should do a quick reminder because I haven't said this in a little while. If you do have a question as opposed to a comment, please submit your question to bppe@dca.ca.gov. Public comments are for comments only, and we won't be able to respond to any comments. But the instructions are on the screen if you are interested in making a public comment on item 5F.
We are open for public comment on 5F as in Foxtrot. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. As a reminder to our mobile device users, if you're having trouble finding that hand button, please hit the ... that's your ellipses button at the bottom, and cycle through one of 3 pages to find the hand. Looking around, I see no request for public comment. Do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. And thank you, Daniel. Appreciate the report. I haven't said that to everybody with each agenda item, but so I apologize for that. But I do appreciate all of you so far for all of your reports. So thank you. We're moving on to item 5G, the Office of Student Assistance and Relief Outreach, or OSAR report.
Thank you, Chair Farron and members. Scott Valverde, Chief of the Bureau's Office of Student Assistance and Relief. I am pleased today to give you an update on OSAR student outreach activities during the third quarter of this fiscal year. Since the last time we met, we have hired and onboarded 2 new staff members, and have also had a temporary appointment into another vacant position while one of my team members is on an extended leave. So overall, that's been quite a bit of staff resource changes in a small period of time. This is already proven to be very helpful to us in terms of increasing our capacity to do more work on the student outreach side, and just to pick up on some projects that have been a little bit dormant while those positions were vacant. And I would say just generally in a small program like ours, 3 position changes in 1 quarter is pretty noteworthy, and again, in a positive way. So as we go into the charts, I just wanted to start with a high-level overview of what we do and how that will translate into the data that I'll be showing you. So the OSAR team connects often with both prospective students who are considering higher education options, and also with students who are directly impacted by school closures, individual site closures, program closures, or other administrative actions taken by the Bureau that may affect students, et cetera. For prospective students, we help them make informed choices, help them with resources and information, and hopefully some expertise and tips and things like that to help them make an informed decision. And then for students who are impacted by closures, we help them in a variety of different ways, including obtaining their student records, helping students access various federal relief programs for students who are in financial aid programs and others. Of course, we help them with the Student Tuition Recovery Fund, which Yvette will report on after me, and other state relief programs, as well as just a variety of other services and needs and needs for support and advocacy the students may have. So engaging with those students in those ways, with those needs, we do that in a variety of different ways and in different modes and in different venues. So for example, we go to college fairs, we go to community-based events, we go to sort of industry supported or industry-driven events. We participate in workshops for discharging veterans coming out of military service and who are eligible for the GI Bill and other services. We participate and partner with K-12 districts to do outreach for high school students as well. And we also host and attend webinars that either we put on or other partners put on. And we do in-person workshops and hold one-on-one appointments for students who are impacted by closure. So in doing so, we share resources with students in a variety of different ways as well, often through mass or individual emails and phone calls. basically however we can connect with students in whatever way it works best for them. So given all that variety and that expanded scope and expanded use of technology and modes, we've done the best we can in the charts that I'm going to go over to sort of capture all those contacts and engagements, and also to try to do so by the different topics that we cover with those students, so you get a really good idea of where and how we're connecting with students and what we're helping them with. So if you can go on to chart A there, Richie, and then skip down to the next slide. Thank you. So chart A are our informed choice workshops and presentations that my staff have participated in. I should have started by saying that all these charts are cumulative for the first 3 quarters of this fiscal year. So obviously we'll be focusing on the most recently closed quarter. So in that quarter, we participated in 5 such events. The most significant of which are the 2 Black College Expos that we participated in. Our large fairs are always well attended. They include both private, nonprofit, public institutions, other support resources. It's a really good space to be able to engage with students. And we met with 900 such students over the course of those 2 events. If you go to the next slide, Richie, one in Los Angeles and then one in Oakland. You move on to chart B. Next sort of pillar that I talked about are students who are impacted by closure. So the first way that we often and commonly engage with students who are impacted by closure, we get a student roster from the school, or however we can get a roster, and then develop emails that include a lot of initial kind of real-time resources that students need as they're dealing with sort of the urgency of the closure, basically just awareness of our office, the services we provide, some basic information on STRIF, a closed school guide that we have that gives them a bunch of resources and tips, like, getting your copies of your records as soon as possible, things like that. Links to our websites and other key websites, and then offers of either one-on-one appointments or workshops, depending on what we're doing. So we, if you skip to the next slide, Richie, had 3 such events, 3 such examples of that this quarter, listed here on this chart. So that is that. Moving on to chart C are our closed school workshops. That's the next way we engage with students. Sometimes, but not always. This is the best approach depending on the circumstances, the logistics, where students are at, the number of students, just the kind of the urgency of need, whether there are any other partners involved. We generally kind of make a decision whether we want to offer workshops or just kind of do it all via one-on-one appointments or both. So we had 3 such workshops this quarter. The first of which there at Healthcare Career College, and then at University of Antelope Valley. So you can see in both of those cases, we did both the email outreach, and then also that resulted in workshops as well. I will say for University of Antelope Valley that we have had quite a bit of activity. This was the largest impact closure of this particular quarter, and we've had quite a bit of activity and engagement with those students and with our partners around those students that have trickled over into this fiscal year as well. So, I'm sorry, this fiscal quarter. So I do intend to provide a more full readout on that particular closure and those outcomes at the next meeting. But for example, our in-person workshop happened after the close of the quarter, and we've had a lot of one-on-one appointments with those students as well. So more to come on that. If we move on to chart C, I also talked about phone calls as well. So we do the best we can, staff, anytime we're able to contact a student, or a student contacts us with phone and they have a particular need or service that we provide to them, we log those calls in by category so that we can report these out for you. We had 352 such phone calls this quarter, also impacted by the UAV closure. Chart E on the next one, Richie, similarly, we capture student emails, follow-up emails after that initial outreach, where we are providing information, resources, responses, information on STRIF, et cetera. We try to capture those as well. And then the last one is chart F, which are our one-on-one appointments. You can see that big bump there in March after the events that I reported out on. Many of those students either came to both the workshop or webinar and also had a one-on-one appointment or just preferred a one-on-one appointment. And so we commonly cover topics like STRIF, loan relief, and assistance with just things related to the closure that they're facing. Again, getting their transcripts often, getting records, information on other schools they may be transferring to, et cetera. So I think that bump up there in a couple of these categories in the last few charts is reflective and representative of both that increased staff capacity that I mentioned earlier with new staff coming on board and being onboarded, able to do more there, as well as just the impact of the UAV closure itself. So that is my report, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions from the committee?
This is Melanie Delgado. I just have a comment, and I may have mentioned this before, but I think the work that you're doing is really important, and I commend you on all of the good work that you guys have been doing in your student outreach. And I would encourage you to work with, if you can, maybe county child welfare organizations, or reach out to the foster care ombudsman, because this is a population that I think often gets overlooked, but they would really benefit from the information that you have to offer, especially the older youth who are preparing to transition out of foster care, who are looking at attending college. So I would encourage you to do that.
Thank you.
Melanie, any other comments from committee members? Okay, hearing none, we will move to public comment for item 5G. First, we will check if there's anyone in person in the room.
There are no public members present.
Thank you. Now we'll move to our virtual attendees for public comment on item 5G.
We are open for public comment on 5G as in golf. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... at the bottom, to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. We are at the last item of item 5. So item 5H, the Student Tuition Recovery Fund, or STRIF report.
Good morning, Chair Farron and committee members. I'm Yvette Johnson. I am the chief of the Student Tuition Recovery Fund unit, which, as Chair Farron said, also known as STRIF. The STRIF was created to help mitigate the economic loss of students that are impacted by schools. So the STRIF unit is a unit that actually processes applications that are submitted by students. I want to start off with, just as you know, the STRIF unit is a very small unit. We had 4 analysts. We are currently down to 2 analysts due to, from our last quarter, where we unfortunately lost 2 of our staff members due to promotional opportunities within the Bureau, as well as other state agencies. We lost 2 very valuable employees, and we wish them well with where they are now. We appreciate all the work they did in supporting STRIF and helping students that were affected by school closures. We're currently in the process of recruiting to fill those vacancies. Our goal is to conduct interviews and fill those vacancies as soon as possible, because it does have a large impact. As I reported in our last meeting, we are moving forward with the how to complete the STRIF application video that will help students complete the online STRIF application. We are in discussion with the DCA, the Department of Consumer Affairs Public Affairs Office. So far, we have submitted a script to the Public Affairs Office, and we are awaiting next steps as they're developing a storyboard for the video. We are also looking into adding pop-out boxes or explanation boxes to be incorporated into the online STRIF application, as was suggested at a prior advisory committee meeting. We appreciate the committee's feedback on our website, as well as the how to complete the application. We appreciate all your feedback, and we look forward to getting that produced soon. So when the video is released, we'll be making changes to our website, and those changes will be highlighting the video and the application more. Okay, next slide, please, Richie. So as you can see from our statistics, the number of STRIF claims received has stayed pretty steady over the past 2 quarters. We are continuing to see the majority of the STRIF applications, pretty much 3 out of 4 applications, are being submitted via our online system, and we still are receiving the paper claims as well. Next slide, please. Due to the temporary reduction in our staff since the last quarter, our number of claims closed has dropped quite a bit, but we are still working diligently to keep processing the claims as efficiently as possible. The number of claims denied increased this quarter, and those are mostly due to claims that were submitted more than 4 years after the qualifying event that made them eligible to apply for STRIF, which means that if the school closed more than 4 years ago and the student is now just submitting the claim, those would be denied. So in this 4th quarter, we also reported that there are 0 claims as unable to contact. Those claims are the ones where staff works to try to find different forms of ways to contact the student, and it could be via mail, email, telephone. We also have access to the program called LexisNexis, where we can do searches to try to find current contact information. If we are unable to get anything that's more current, then we will close out that claim. However, the claimant does have the ability to contact us to reopen that claim if they decide to pursue it. Okay, next slide, please. So on our current STRIF claims, analysts have completed the review of 99 claims that are currently pending either approval or denial by management. The analysts currently have 94 claims that they're reviewing, and that means that they're active claims. We have 47 claims where we are waiting for student responses. This is once again where the analyst has reached out to the claimant. They reviewed the claim, but however, they cannot continue to process the claim to determine an economic loss because there is information pending. And once that information is received, then the staff will be able to continue to resume the review of the claim. And we currently have 553 claims in the queue. And these are claims that have not been assigned to analysts yet for review. Next slide, please. So this is a count of what we have pending at the State Controller's Office. So right now we have 23 claims that are pending, waiting for a check to be from the State Controller's Office. And that is almost $400,000 that's pending payment. So far this fiscal year, we've paid out 57 claims with almost $1 million. And as you can see, the balance of the STRIF fund is 31 million, which is over the 25 million. And as a result of that, In April 1st of 2024, the STRIF assessment fee collection was cut off. So schools are no longer required to collect STRIF assessment fees from the students. However, the schools are required to still submit the STRIF assessment forms each quarter. Next slide, please. And this is our list of large impact closures. These are the schools that we expect to have the largest hit on the fund. And those are the ones that we're working with currently. We'll do an evaluation to see if there needs to be a change in any of this. And
Thanks, Yvette.
Mhm.
Any questions or comments from the committee members?
This is Tess. Yvette, I just wanted to commend you and your team, however small it might be at the moment, for having 0 in the unable to contact category. That's always a category that can be, especially painful. So to get to 0 is quite an accomplishment. It sounds like you've been very resourceful. So just wanted to say great job.
Thank you.
And I also want to say thank you to the folks in the STRIF unit. I represent a lot of students who submitted applications, and it makes a huge difference when you all get to their applications and you grant them in most of our cases. So thank you for all your hard work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I had one quick question, and it may be too soon to know at this point, but I'm curious if the unit has any expectations or idea about what the closing of University of Antelope Valley could mean for the STRIF unit, since OSAR is seeing a huge increase in student contact, if any of that has started flowing to you yet in terms of STRIF applications.
So far, we have not seen that impact yet, but we are braced for it just in case. We are aware.
Yeah, I had a feeling. Hopefully those 2 positions can get filled sooner rather than later to help with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, we'll move to public comment then for item 5H, the Student Tuition Recovery Fund report. First, just confirm that there's no in-person request for public comment.
There are no public members.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll move to the virtual attendees for public comment on item 5H.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Although I believe, I don't know about the rest of you, but we've been sitting for an hour and a half. So I was thinking we could do a quick 5-minute break. I think we'll still be able to finish out the agenda. But one of the items in particular could be a little bit longer discussion. So I think we'll just do a quick 5 minutes. It's 11:12. So if we can all be back at 11:17, that would be great. And we'll just give everyone a chance to stand up, refill coffee, get water, whatever y'all need. See you shortly. I think we should just reestablish that we have everyone here. I feel like I need to do that. Let me just go through, and when I say your name, if you can just let me know that you're here. First, Lee Farron, I am here. Tess Dubois-Carey.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy Tambasia. Maybe not quite back yet. Melanie Delgado. Okay. Joseph Holt.
Yes, here.
Robert Boykin,
Here.
Robin Smith.
Here.
Okay, let me just, did we lose Tracy and Melanie? I don't even see them on the list, right? Oh, there's Melanie. Melanie Delgado, are you here? And I'm sorry, Richie or Debbie, did Tracy mention that she was going to have to jump off by any chance?
She had mentioned she was going to, I'm sorry. She had mentioned she was going to drop off from about 10 to 11:30.
Oh,
She should be back
okay.
fairly shortly.
Okay. Let me just, sorry, it's not easy to see, to get everyone in the right place. Oh, there's Melanie. Hi, Melanie. Okay, so we have 6 again, so we can move forward. Welcome
Do we
everyone.
need to take another official roll call? I think my count is the same as yours, but I don't know if we
Oh,
need
do you want me to have Richie do it just to be safe? Okay.
Probably a good idea.
Okay.
Chair, you
Richie, can
available?
you officially roll call us, please?
Yes. So
Thank
Lee
you.
Farron,
Present.
Tess Dubois Carey,
Present.
Joseph Holt,
Present.
Robert Boykin,
Present.
Tracy Tambasia. She's absent. Melanie Delgado,
Present.
Robin Smith,
Present.
and that gives us a quorum.
Thank you all. Thanks for your patience. All right, then moving on to agenda item 6, the status update on current regulatory packages.
Wonderful. And we have David Dumble here to give us that update.
Hello, I'm David Dumble. I'm the Regulations Manager for the Bureau, and I have some updates on the status of the Bureau's regulatory proposals. First, I am very pleased to report that on April 3rd, the Office of Administrative Law approved the Bureau's proposal regarding a substantive change in distance education learning management systems, and this will become effective on July 1st. Just as a reminder, this was a regulatory proposal made necessary by the legislature adding a distance education learning management system change to the list of substantive changes that needed to be either reported to or approved by the Bureau before being implemented. We also took the opportunity to not only implement the statute, but also extensively revise the substantive change in method of instructional delivery form. The new form will be available on the Bureau's website when the regulation becomes effective on July 1st. I'm also pleased to report that just yesterday, the Office of Administrative Law approved the Bureau's public institutions regulatory proposal, which expands the Bureau's authority to issue citations to include public institutions from other states that have a physical presence in California. This regulation was necessary to implement the legislature's expansion of the Bureau's jurisdiction over such public institutions, and it too will become effective on July 1st. There are 2 remaining regulatory proposals that began in 2023 that are still going through the process. They are the change in signature requirements, which will no longer require the boards of every member of a board of a nonprofit to sign any document submitted to the Bureau, and the change in the date of closure notification, which is necessary because the legislature gave the Bureau the authority to specify the date of closure of institutions that closed without specifying the date to the Bureau. Both of these are currently in the 45-day comment period, and at this point, we have received no comments. The comment periods will end for one at the end of May and the other at the beginning of June, which means they should go to the Office of Administrative Law sometime in July for approval. And if they are approved, they would become effective on October 1st. The Bureau currently has 3 regulatory proposals going through the approval process at the Department of Consumer Affairs, and all of them have been presented to the advisory committee at previous meetings. They are the revision of the process for accepting renewal applications after an institution's approval period has lapsed, the changes to the minimum operating standards for financial reports, and changes to the minimum operating standards for refund policies. All three of these have been submitted to the department, and we have integrated the department's feedback into the text of the proposals. We anticipate all three of these being approved by agency and being submitted to the Office of the Administrative Law, if not by the end of this year, then in Q1 of 2025. We have previously discussed with the committee another regulatory proposal regarding faculty qualifications. However, after examining the committee's feedback, we've decided that we need to gather more information on this proposal. And so we are not proceeding at this time, but fully intend to go forward with it at a later date. Does anyone have any questions about any of the status of the Bureau's regulatory proposals? If no one has any comments or questions, I just have one final announcement, and that is this will be my last time appearing before the advisory committee. I'm retiring from state service effective July 31st, so I will not be at the August meeting. I joined the Bureau in 2020, and since the time that I've been here, we've gotten 4 Section 100s approved by Office of Administrative Law, and assuming date of closure and signature requirements are approved, that will be 10 regulatory approvals in about 4-year period, which is pretty good. And then we have 3 more in process. So it's been a pleasure to work with the committee over the past 4 years, and I wish the committee and the Bureau all the luck going forward.
Thank you, David. Your updates have always been very helpful, and I appreciate the work you did to make it clear for the committee, responsive to our requests on clarifying the process and the status and where everything was. It's made a big difference, I think, for all of us to be able to understand what's happening. So really appreciate all that you've done.
Thank you.
Yeah, echo that, and congratulations. Enjoy your retirement.
If I may just chime in with one comment very quickly, I would say that the pace that Dave just mentioned of 10 in the last couple of years is more than just pretty good. I would call it pretty outstanding. So just would want to from the Bureau just thank Dave for all of his efforts over the last few years. And we've really done a lot of transformation of our regulatory work using our regulatory authority. We've really figured out, I think, a really good cadence for working with the advisory committee to get feedback on those regulatory packages. And he's obviously, we all hope wish him well as he goes off into retirement, and obviously much work from the Bureau side to be proud of. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Before you leave, we do have to open it for public comment, so don't run away just yet. I'm so sorry. We have to, we'll open up item 6 for public comment. First, just confirm anyone in person in the room who'd like to make a public comment.
This is the moderator. We can go ahead with online comment while we wait for the room.
Sounds great. Thank you.
We are open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda? Or public comment in the room, perhaps?
Let's just confirm that there's nobody in the room who wants to make a public comment for the record.
There's no one in the room. Sorry.
Thank you. Appreciate it. No, you're fine. Thank you. Okay. Thank you again, David. We really appreciate it. Wish you the best. We will move on to item number 7, which is the Foundation for California Community Colleges report and Bureau recommendations on fees and financial stability. And this report was sent around a while back, but I don't know, Debbie, do you want to present on this?
Yes, I'm happy to kick off the discussion.
Okay.
And then turn it over to our guests for a little bit more information. So just as a quick reminder and historical context, the Bureau operations, paying for the staff and all the costs of running the agency are paid for from a fund called the Private Postsecondary Education Administrative Fund. That fund faces a substantial deficit that threatens the Bureau's ability to continue to protect consumers. The deficit has been under scrutiny for several years. The actual expenditures of the Bureau have outpaced revenues generated since 2017-18. So this has been an issue that's been kind of front of mind, I know, for the Bureau and Bureau stakeholders for quite some time. In prior years, various alternative fee structures and annual fees in particular have been proposed, but none have yet been adopted. And instead of adopting a change to the annual fee structure for institutions licensed by the Bureau, the legislature in 2022-23 provided the Bureau with $24 million from the general fund over a 3-year period to stabilize funding and allow the Bureau to explore additional options for revenue sufficiency. So a small portion of that augmentation was set aside for a vendor to conduct needed research and analysis on how to proceed. So with those resources, the Bureau entered into an interagency agreement with the Foundation for California Community Colleges. And what we asked them to do was to explore issues and potential revenue sources beyond the typical licensing fee models that had previously been proposed. So I am very happy that they are able to join us here today to share what they did, what they learned, and what they ultimately recommended. I will turn it over to Joseph Quintana, who can introduce his team.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Debbie. And I'm trying, we do have some slides, and do we? There we go. Okay, if we can go to the next one, we do have, yes. So joining me today is Sarah Billingsley and Amy Supinger, and we're all I'm gonna say a few words, and then I'll pass it to Sarah, and then we'll hear from Amy, who will really get into the meat of the presentation. But I just wanted to say a couple words on the foundation. I think for a study like this, it might be wise. The Foundation for California Community Colleges, the group that's doing this. And yes, we are a nonprofit auxiliary with a mission to support and enhance the missions of the community colleges. We do partner directly with the Board of Governors for the California Community Colleges. But we've also, in our 25-year history, really found ourselves as this kind of insider outsider to state government. We're a private nonprofit that does a lot of work with government agencies who have the opportunity or a connection to community colleges in some way. And so when the opportunity to partner with the Bureau came about to kind of address a legislative requirement while also taking a more kind of holistic view on the opportunities and challenges, it seemed like a great fit for us, and we were excited to partner with the Bureau and the DCA and others to have a kind of engaging opportunity to not just kind of get a scope of work, run off, and then produce a report. We really wanted to partner and create something that hopefully could create a roadmap to help with what has been, as Debbie mentioned, a kind of a long-term funding challenge that the Bureau's been working through. And so, with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Sarah, who will talk a little bit about how we approached this report, and then we'll hear from Amy.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Yes, hello everyone. I'm Sarah Billingsley. I serve as Senior Director for Intersegmental Student Success at the Foundation for California Community Colleges. And I think we can actually move 2 slides ahead. The next slide should just be the overview, that Joseph just provided. And then I'm here to talk a little bit about our methodology. And so to generate the report that we created, the Foundation CCC employed a multi-pronged approach, which included discovery, extensive background research, and then, of course, data gathering and analysis. And so over about 13 weeks, Foundation CCC met with leaders from DCA and BPPE to assess the existing structure and learn what options have been explored in the past. And we gained an in-depth understanding of the fiscal forecast that facing the Bureau, and then also the challenges created by the organizational structure and historical efforts to either create efficiencies or improve the Bureau's efficacy. And then, during that discovery phase, the the DCA and BPPE leaders recommended that we look into some other governmental regulatory agencies. And so we conducted some background research of other agencies and determined themes from there. Some example industries include hospitals, the Board of Gambling Control, and the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team. And this wasn't necessarily all sequential. It was like over a several month period, we were gathering information, conducting, this discovery meetings. And then we also decided that we needed to talk to some stakeholders. And so we identified about a dozen people that we should try to interview. And ultimately we conducted 11 stakeholder interviews with industry representatives, consumer advocates, legislative staff, and other government agency officials whom have expertise in or actually lead efforts, like enforcement efforts in California agencies. And they were generally high-level employees that agreed to talk on the condition of anonymity because, they weren't specifically authorized to speak on behalf of their organizations, but we were able to garner such insightful perspectives and observations and recommendations for how BPE can and should align the mission with the sufficient revenues. So with all of this data, we decided, okay, now we have to make sense of it. And so we employed a decision matrix, which was basically just, we wanted to take the information and assess, what themes were worthy of bringing forward in our report. The criteria that we decided upon were, would this recommendation or this observation be sufficient? Obviously, would it provide sufficient fund, and is it sustainable? Is it politically feasible based on BPE's historical attempts and the state government's perceived appetite for change? And then the extent to which that option would actually protect California's consumers. And after all of that, we determined, what observations and what recommendations we should put forth in the report. And that's where we got the report that you all received. And with that, I'd love to hand it over to my colleague, Amy Superger, to go through what those observations or options and recommendations are.
Hi, everyone. Hoping you can hear me okay. WebEx and I are not necessarily friends. It's a pleasure to be with you today. My name is Amy Supinger. I'm a Sacramento-based policy consultant. The Foundation for California Community Colleges is one of my longest standing clients. I've done a lot of work for them in the community college space, but also in this sort of intersegmental space. So I'm pleased to be here and can hopefully walk you through the things that we discovered and our takeaway recommendations. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This is, for your perusal, the way that we categorized the recommendations that we included in the report. I would encourage you to actually read the whole report. It's not horribly long, so if you haven't, please do. We did spend a considerable amount of time at the beginning really trying to lay out for readers, and we assumed that the readers of this document were policymakers. They were the ones that asked for the report. They were our audience. But we did spend some time really trying to outline sort of the state of affairs and the state of the industry. We think that many issues related to the regulation of schools stem from sort of a dated or misunderstanding of what this school sector looks like. So we did spend some time trying to level set with our audience at the beginning. We then chunked through our recommendations into basically these 4 overarching themes. So we were asked to look at predominantly fiscal issues. What we quickly realized is that it is near impossible to disentangle fiscal issues from the policy issues that the Bureau faces, that those two things are just inextricably linked. So you can't talk about money, and in this case, things like fees or what general fund funds, without really talking about what role the state of California wants the Bureau to play. So to that end, kind of as you look through this list, keep that in mind. So our four buckets, you can read them here. Increase resources through fees. Obviously, we had to talk about fees. Depending on the year, over 85 to almost 90% of the Bureau's revenue comes from fees. So to walk out of this report with no mention of fees would certainly not be appropriate on our part. The second bucket is expanding the funding sources. We really felt that there were appropriate places for the state general fund to contribute to the operations of the Bureau, and places where the STRIF could be used to further support operations of the Bureau, again, in very limited capacity. Now, slight footnote, we finished this report in December, I think. So we did not have, we were living in the past, we were not living today where we knew what the state budget and the state general fund looked like. So philosophically, I think we still believe that the general fund should be ponying up for some costs here. Whether or not it would have met the threshold for us to include in a, explicitly in a report, knowing what we know now about the general fund, I'm not sure. The third category were things that we sort of categorized as efficiencies and revenue enhancements. And these were places where we felt like the operations of the Bureau could be more efficient. And as a result, bring in more revenue and reduce some costs. We also had another kind of outlier that we put into this category, and we spent a lot of time as a team talking about this. Who are the potential payers to support the Bureau's activities? You have states, you have schools, you have students. You think about sort of the triad of the federal government and higher education regulation and accountability. So we really spent a lot of time trying to identify if there were additional payers that we somehow just weren't seeing in the mix. And then the fourth category, we didn't set out, just to be clear, we didn't set out to identify this fourth category. In this fourth category, we ended up titling Big Picture Reforms. This category was just a byproduct of the work that we did and the people that we spoke to. So there was rarely a conversation with interviewees that did not at some point or another touch on where the Bureau and where this regulatory function is placed in state government, where it's housed. And I would say 9 out of 10 of our interviewees said that they thought that the world of consumer affairs was not the right place for school regulation to be occurring. When we asked our interviewees, okay, tell us where, we had some hemming, we had some hawing. Most folks said in education. And I put that in air quotes because I think that from the beginning of time, this has been an ongoing battle for the work that you all do, which is, are you education or are you consumer affairs? And I think you might be a little bit of a platypus where you're bits and pieces of both. The place where we ran into problems trying to structure a recommendation around where these functions should be housed was that in the world of post-secondary education in California, there is no logical home. So for folks that have been doing this work for 30 plus years, you will remember that the California used to have a higher education coordinating entity, the California Postsecondary Education Commission, which might naturally be a home that we would look to. CPEC went away, was defunded, and I think it might still be in code some places in about 2010 with that fiscal crisis. So that's sort of why we felt in the end this need to mention this big picture reform of, hey, state of California, policymakers, if you are indeed our audience, everyone's suggesting a new home. There is no current candidate for that new home. So perhaps you want to consider creating a higher education agency. Next slide, please. So this slide is one of about 4, I think, where we have looked specifically at the recommendations and tried to quantify them monetarily so that you can get a sense of how much each of these would enhance the revenue of the Bureau. These are, we basically have put, sort of plus or minus. We think these are about, approximate figures. And we worked with the Bureau and DCA's budget shops to try to narrow these dollars down a bit. So on the fees, this is we spent again a lot of time talking about fees and what appropriate fee levels were. We found ourselves increasingly going back to the Bureau and DCA's fee proposal from 2021. Now, 2021, as we all recall, COVID, pandemic, shutdown, all sorts of stuff was going on in our lives as individuals and in policymakers' lives in the policy arena. So we're not entirely clear if that proposal really got the full vetting and attention that it deserved. So we think it's appropriate to resurrect that proposal. The second thing that was also part of that proposal was to change application fees and to change substantive change fees. So the in particular application fees for all types of institutions. We, in the next category, the next block down related to application fees, we are recommending an automatic inflator. So something that will benchmark those fees so that they increase every year. We don't necessarily think that an automatic inflator is appropriate for annual fees because annual fees are based on the income of the school. And so you theoretically have an inflator already built into the base upon which you're assessing the fee. The next sort of lump, well, I guess we're still in the resources. We sort of categorize these as all as the resources through fees. There were some places where we thought direct cost recovery was appropriate, predominantly recovering costs associated with approval and compliance visits. This is something that accrediting agencies do regularly, and we think it would be appropriate here. And then the whole issue of out-of-state schools was really one that elevated and came back to us time and time again. And the fees that are charged for out-of-state schools to register with the Bureau was so remarkably low in comparison to what we found happening in other states. Can I get the next slide, please? So this is this was our second lump of category, which was the bringing in revenue from other sources. So this is our general fund and our use of STRIF. We thought it and continue to believe that it is appropriate for the state of California to use general fund for enforcement costs. And to fund OSAR, which is a relatively new office, in the great timeline of the Bureau. The enforcement costs we found, while the Bureau has incentives to go after bad apples in the enforcement space, and certainly has the very best of intentions, when the costs of those cases are borne by the Bureau and are not really budgeted for, it is very difficult for the Bureau to keep up with the litigation costs that it would incur when it is competing against big schools with money. And the only way to really level that playing field is for the state general fund to step in and cover those costs. The OSAR costs, we think that one's pretty self-explanatory. The legislature established this office. The direct benefit to students and consumers is such that we think it's appropriate for general fund. Now, the STRIF pieces, there were two things that we felt appropriate for the use of STRIF. One is the funding of the personnel that work on STRIF and whose time is dedicated to that, which, as I understand from your prior presentation, has at present decreased from 4 people to 2 people. Hopefully it gets back up to 4. But it is very common within state budgeting for the folks that administer the fund to be paid for by the fund. So there's past practice for this. We thought that was appropriate. The second thing is the student transcript fee. So right now, student transcripts are provided free of charge. You are the transcript maintainer when schools go out of business. There's a reason why you have that service. There's a reason why you don't charge students for the service. We are not suggesting that you charge students for the service, but we are suggesting that the STRIF pay a per transcript fee as if the student were paying it, but instead of it being paid by the student, it's paid by the fund. It's not tons of money. We think it's about $250,000 a year, but again, we think that was an appropriate use. Next slide, please. Kind of our potential revenue enhancements and efficiencies. These were places where we just saw some room for improvement between, for example, the amount of fines that are assessed versus what's actually collected. So these are collection activities. These are how do you get a better sort of rate of return when you go to charge someone? How do you actually collect on the dollars? So fines, assessments, whatnot. Also in this category, I think we had, is there a second one here? We had a better verification. We had better verification of when schools self-report data. So schools self-report their revenue data, and we, in just sort of a quick sampling, we're not convinced that the self-reported data is always correct. And I'm not implying there's malice, but I do think that there should be some additional verification checks when schools are self-reporting their revenue data, because that is, again, the basis for their fees. So that was also one that we had in this category. We just have no way to figure out or ballpark a dollar figure associated with that. Do we have any more slides, or is that the end of our deck? Oh, we do. So we had, again, we had sort of a catch-all category. When we were talking, going back to a previous comment I made, when we were talking about the varying or potential payers, and we talked about schools, we talk about the state, we talk about students, one of the things that just struck us was perhaps there was room to talk about graduates. And we recognize that graduates who go into licensed fields then proceed to pay licensing fees. And to be clear, this is not a well fleshed out proposal. We kind of were throwing it out there a little bit like spaghetti on the wall. But that maybe there was a room for a very small per graduate charge that would be collected during the licensing process, or for other graduates as some kind of an after graduation fee or assessment. When we were thinking about who benefits, who the ultimate beneficiary is of a well-regulated industry, one of the parties wasn't just current students, but past students, and keeping the quality of their prior education sort of intact. And so we thought that they could potentially be a pair. Is this our last slide? Yes, apparently this is our last slide. So I'm happy to talk through any of those recommendations in more depth if you think it would be helpful. And we can still do that. Let me turn it back to Debbie at this juncture, and then we'll loop back.
Thank you so much, Amy, and to Joseph and to Sarah. I do want to give a little bit more context before we open up for discussion. But first, I just want to, again, thank you for the work that you all did. I know when we originally approached you about the project, we were looking for someone to, bring more of a kind of state higher education lens, kind of less of the typical licensee fee driven proposals that, are common to the DCA licensing agencies. And, I think you all did a fantastic job. You've just been incredibly thoughtful, responsive and professional partners. And I think the helpful suggestions and the fresh takes that you all provided are useful both for the immediate context of the Bureau's funding, but also will continue to bear fruit for statewide policy discussions in the years to come. So again, thank you for that. Of course, our most pressing issue, as I talked about at the beginning, was the fiscal debate. And I think we also have a couple slides here as well. But the Bureau did provide the Foundation's report to the legislature, along with a cover letter that effectively endorsed some of the particular recommendations and not at a scale that would solve for the Bureau's financial situation for the foreseeable future. Do we have those slides in here as well? So, 4 of them that we, wholeheartedly endorsed as presented by the Foundation were using the Student Tuition Recovery Fund to cover claim administration. I think, Amy obviously outlined a lot of these proposals in some depth and the rationale for them, so I won't go through that again. We also appreciated the recommendation to be able to draw resources from the Student Tuition Recovery Fund for transcript provision. Also increasing application fees, because that is an area where prior research has shown the workload and the fees are just very out of sync. So bringing them more in sync should be a priority. And again, increasing out-of-state institution fees to, again, bring that workload and revenue closer, not yet in line fully, but closer in line. And then there were a couple other recommendations that we thought the legislature should consider, but potentially with some tweaks. One is, there wasn't necessarily a recommendation from the Foundation called increased Bureau efficiency, but there were a few places in which their report and analysis did suggest that there were ways that we might be able to uncover, turn some stones over and find some additional resources. Amy talked about, is there a way that we could better verify revenue that schools are reporting as they're paying their annual fees? We think that's an excellent idea. Something we had been thinking about before this report, in fact, and excited to kind of have it validated that this could be somewhere that we could dig into a bit further. Also, some recommendations around better collection of penalties and fines that are assessed through the Bureau's disciplinary process. So, and of course, we talked earlier in the meeting about our change to our new IT system, and we believe there's going to be some efficiencies there. So overall, we committed ourselves to reducing that structural deficit by $1 million collectively across a host of initiatives. Amy referenced potentially drawing resources for the Office of Student Assistance and Relief from the general fund. She also referenced some of the challenges associated with that, particularly at this time. So we recommended that might be some place where we could also look to the Student Tuition Recovery Fund, given the statutory alignment between the purpose of STRIF and the purpose of OSAR to help students who are struggling and facing economic loss after attending private post-secondary institutions. And then finally, depending on which of those recommendations are adopted and pursued by the legislature, we would recommend, again, increasing annual fees to whatever level is needed. The more of those recommendations that are pursued by the legislature, the smaller the annual fee increase would need to be to cover up the gap. I don't want to go into a lot of depth about what was proposed in the past. There was our 2021 proposal, which I know the Foundation folks looked quite a bit into. There were some prior proposals as well. But this chart, again, this is copied straight from the letter to the legislature, which is found in your packet. But this chart just outlines kind of what the fee structure looks like currently, what we put out in 2021. I think we would concur that the structure, broadly speaking, that was previously proposed has a lot of merit. But we also just put out 2 alternatives, alternative 1 and 2, not because they're the only alternatives, but mostly to illustrate that alternatives are out there, to show how you can tweak these different components of a fee structure to get to a required amount, whatever level of funding is needed after the other proposals have been considered and adopted. So you can see that the proposals, if you just look at, again, at alternative 1 and 2, they're structured quite differently, but would get to the same amount of resources at the end of the day. And so really we put out 2 alternatives, not to say those are necessarily better than what we did in 2021, but to illustrate that there are options and to, hopefully to promote engagement in the discussion. So with that, I would, mostly turn out, I imagine most of the discussion and the questions will be aimed to the foundation team, but happy to open it up to hear whatever comments and questions the committee members have. I also do want to note that we have a member of the budgets team who has been, Matt Nishimini, who has been part of all of these discussions from 2021 and beyond, certainly in what we've talked about today, but has also a lot of additional historical context on the Bureau's finances as well. So just should we need him, he's there too.
Thanks, Debbie, and thanks to the foundation and all of you for presenting. We appreciate it. It's really, I think the study was, you're right, it's not terribly long and it's very digestible. Like, I think that it just was really well prepared and easy to understand. So I appreciate that. Advisory committee members, do folks have comments or thoughts that they'd like to share?
I'd like to also commend the report and for a topic that is as complex as this intrinsically. It was succinct and very well done. Appreciate the degree of creativity, which was not radical, I would say, but it was more than is typical in other government reporting and studies that I've engaged with over the years. So I think it was work well done. For the Bureau, I also, Debbie, feedback for you and your staff. I appreciated the transparency of looking at different alternatives. That was very helpful to see when you pull different levers, what the impacts are. Obviously, the highest sensitivity from the institutional perspective, which was substantial in the 2021 proposal, is just a exorbitant increase in fees, which and for institutions limited resources go from one place to another, and so our institutions looking at almost a doubling of our fees based on the changes in structure, many of which had to do with additional locations and some of the finer points of the details. So the transparency in those alternatives, I think, are helpful for institutions and for our associations to be able to look under the hood a little bit and see how we might face that challenge. And again, I also appreciate the creative areas outside of institutional fees that we could look at pursuing and talk to the legislature and engage with them about.
This is Melanie Delgado. I would echo all of the compliments about the report and the recommendations. I think that it was really well done, and I think, as Lee said, it was easily digestible. The one thing that I would just raise, and I know that the Bureau is probably already has this in mind, but if you start to draw resources from the strip, I would just encourage you to remember what the primary purpose of that is for, and that really important fund needs to remain healthy and viable for students who are experiencing economic loss. So I understand that the different proposals are to take funding for administrative costs that are related to that purpose, but just to make sure that that as you're moving forward with something like this, that you keep the students in mind and keep in mind the importance of that fund for providing for potential economic hardships for those students.
I think that's a really good point with honestly any of the proposals of just really being clear and concise in what the money is being used for, so that it doesn't become sort of a waterfall, right? Where something like, oh, well, we used it for this, let's just use it for this too. And not saying that anyone would intentionally do that, but as time goes on, meaning can get twisted sometimes. So that's a really good point.
Hi, I want to say I also appreciate the hard work that's gone into this report and the Bureau's work on coming up with some compromise solutions. I want to say I strongly support using the STRIF funds to pay for transcripts, to fund the STRIF administration, as well as fund OSAR. It's extremely important that, to the extent students have experienced, for example, school closures, which is incredibly devastating, that their STRIF applications be quickly reviewed so that they can get back on their feet financially. And also, I think supporting OSAR is extremely important because, STRIF applications are not easy for students to fill out. They require a lot of detailed information as well as documentation, and students need guidance on how to do that. So I realize this is a greater amount that students have to pay, but I think a good compromise from the student advocate perspective is to strongly support ensuring that STRIF is funded as well as OSAR, again, to benefit those students who are most harmed. Um, I did have a question. My biggest concern about the report is um, I'm concerned that the fee increases proposed for the schools are not enough to cover the full amount that the Bureau needs to continue to get out of the red and continue what are very important services. We have to remember that the vast majority of licensed businesses, for-profit businesses in particular, pay fees in all types of businesses to fully fund the agencies that administer the licensure programs and oversight. And I think that to the extent we move away from that and require taxpayers to start funding this, we need justification for that. I think if it's a short-term solution until we bring the fees up to the point where schools are fully paying for the Bureau to continue operation, that makes sense. But I think in the long term, there needs to be a way to move it so that it isn't the general fund, but it is the schools that pay for the Bureau. And so I think what would help is for the Bureau to collect more information about school revenues and particular profits. I know that currently the Bureau collects information about annual revenues, and I support sort of having some validation of those numbers. But I think it would be useful for schools to report other information so that the Bureau has a better idea of how these fees impact schools, what they can afford and what they can't afford, by reporting things like how much are they spending on student services, how much are they spending on things like advertising and recruiting and lead generation, how much are they spending on executive compensation, and how much are they actually paying out to shareholders or owners. I think without that kind of information, we lack the information necessary to really determine that it is the general fund that pays some portion of the Bureau's oversight. And I'm just concerned that the fees being proposed by the Bureau really are too low at this point. We have to remember that this Bureau it's been in existence in some form since the early 90s. And during most of its life, the schools did fund the Bureau in its entirety. And that students really need a strong and adequately resourced Bureau to protect them from unscrupulous schools. It also benefits schools. Schools that are legitimate and that are good should not have to compete with schools that are engaging in fraud or providing substandard educations. And so I think I just want to remind schools that there is also a benefit to having a strong and adequately resourced Bureau. Thanks.
Hi, this is Tracy Tambasia. I want to add my thanks for a really thorough report and presentation. I have one question. I heard mention in the discussion of fees for out-of-state institutions that you looked, I believe I heard you say that you looked at comparisons and how our fees compare to other agencies in other states. Were there any other insights in looking at fee structures for similar organizations in other states that also informed your recommendations, or is the positioning of the work here so unique that you didn't find similarities?
I can take this, or Sarah, I don't know if Sarah wanted to take it. No. What we found when we were looking at other states was that California was really just in a unique set of circumstances here. And when we looked specifically at those out-of-state institution fees, we were the only place that we could even find comparative fees was around institutions that were part of or not part of SARA, the state reciprocity agreement. So even those didn't, I mean, California is not part of SARA. My understanding is there are a myriad reasons why that is the case. So we certainly we're not suggesting that change. But when California out-of-state fees were low compared to the SARA agreement fees, that told us that our fees were particularly low. On other kinds of school fees, we just had a hard time.
Yeah, and I would just offer that in addition to looking at the fees with out-of-state schools, you know, we looked into other agencies, and we're so different from many of these different agencies, particularly in funding sources. So for example, with hospitals, there's a per bed fee. There's just a number of different fees. There's federal funding that's different. And so, you know, we tried our best to pull out themes about, you know, sort of how these regulatory agencies are funded, and then parse out what aligns with what we're looking at here.
We did spend a fair amount of time looking at financial institutions, in part because we felt like the financial risk to students had a parallel to the financial risk of consumers in the banking industry. And one of the things that really was striking in that comparison was when a bank went out of business, either at the behest of regulators or by itself, the other banks basically had to pony up more in fees to make up the shortfall. So when you ended up with these shortfall circumstances, the state didn't chip in, the existing set of payers paid more. So we did mention that under this sort of notion of what we called a pro rata assessment. And we recognize that would be somewhat problematic depending upon, you know, how, or not problematic, I guess, depending upon how the Bureau would want to implement it. But that was kind of one of the closest parallels that we were able to find.
Did you happen to, in that looking into separate industries, find comparable percentages of revenue? Ultimately, the fee structure for the Bureau comes down to a percentage of institutional revenue, right, subject to that cap. And so approaching 1% of revenue is one of the scenarios. Did you find that to be typical, or other examples of businesses, that is tax-paying businesses, for-profit businesses that are paying corporate taxes as well, paying additionally a percentage of their revenue to a regulatory agency? How do we compare, for example, between banking and education?
That is a good question. And I candidly cannot remember, and I apologize for that. We can go back through our notes, or Sarah might have.
Well, I was just going to offer that we looked into that. We tried. We searched through the you know, the various industries that we had identified. It was kind of hard to find that information. So no, we were not able to identify the you know, what percentage, at least in relation to the industries that we did our background research in.
And the DCA fees for other licensed, typically are not revenue based, right? They're flat fees based on, like, to be a doctor or to be a pharmacist, or their licensing fees are transactional and tied to the license. They're not derivative of revenue, which is functionally a tax. And so looking for other examples of that. Go ahead.
I mean, that was another kind of interesting point that we did come across, which was we were looking for places where industries were charged and not individuals. And most of DCA's world are individuals. And like you point out, they are licensing fees. One of the places where we were one of the entities we looked at was the Gambling Control Commission, because we were like, okay, gambling as an industry. But even in that particular industry, individual owners of gambling establishments are paying a fee. So we spent some time thinking about, is there a parallel? Do you want the individual owner of an institution to be paying a fee separate and distinct from the institution itself? And we kind of shied away from that. Anyone have any other questions for us?
I would imagine this will likely be an ongoing conversation as more, as the Bureau and regulators and others figure out what is the right answer. I mean, I think the report is really helpful and alternatives were presented, but we don't necessarily know what like the answer is yet, right? And as you mentioned, like things change, like the general fund looks different. So, so all of that feels like this is something that could be an ongoing discussion for the advisory committee as the Bureau kind of moves forward with any implementation.
This one final comment from us before we hang up. We went into this hoping and looking for a single answer because that would be lovely for everyone. And the truth of the matter is there wasn't one. And so we approached the work as trying almost in a cafeteria plan way, if you will. We wanted to give the Bureau some options and some set of options to sort of mix and match from. We are not the policymakers. We are not the regulators. We wanted to leave those decisions as to how you mixed and matched those up to you and up to the legislature. So hopefully we gave you a robust set of choosings.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from the advisory committee? Okay, then I will open up the item for public comment. This is item 7, Foundation for California Community Colleges report and Bureau recommendations on fees and financial stability. First, confirm if there are any folks present in the room who would like to make a comment.
There are no public members present.
Thank you. We'll move to virtual attendees.
We are now open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, you have 3 different pages and only one of them has a hand. So you may need to hit the ellipses button. That's the ... at the bottom in order to find your hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you again for the presentation. We'll move on to agenda item 8, which is future agenda items. So committee members, if you have any suggestions or requests for future agenda items, this is your chance. Okay, moving agenda item 8 to public comment. Anyone in the room who would like to make a public comment in person?
There are no public members present.
Thank you. And moving to virtual attendees who would like to make a public comment for future agenda items.
Members on WebEx, if you would like to make a comment about future agenda items, now's your opportunity. Please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
I do, thank you. And that leads us to adjournment. So I just want to say thank you to David for your excellent moderation. Thank you to everyone at the Bureau for your presentations and the information you've provided. And to the committee members for your engagement. I think this was really, I feel like these meetings are getting even more effective and efficient with the information that's being provided, and it's really great. So I appreciate all the work that went into it. Thank you all, and we will see you in August.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.